The sun hung low, a bruised smear of orange bleeding into the horizon, casting long shadows across the cracked earth of the border town. Dust swirled in lazy eddies, kicked up by boots and hooves, clinging to the air like a memory that wouldn't fade. The street smelled of sweat, leather, and the faint metallic temps of blood dried into the dirt. It was the kind of place where hope came to die, where men traded their souls for whiskey and women for coin. The auction yard sat at the edge of this nowhere town, a ramshackle square of warped boards and rusted nails, hemmed in by sagging warehouses that leaned like drunkards against the sky. Wes Colton stood at the fringe of the crowd, his hat tilted low, the brim cutting a shadow across his sun-weathered face. His hands, calloused and steady, rested loose at his sides, fingers brushing the worn grip of the revolver slung low on his hip. He'd come for a horse, maybe a bottle to dull the ache of another day spent riding the endless plains, but the air carried something heavier than dust today, a low hum of cruelty that made his jaw tighten. The crowd's voices rose and fell, a mix of jeers, laughter, and the cold cadence of commerce. At the center of it all, a wooden platform stood, slapped together like an afterthought, and on it, a young woman. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, the kind that bit into skin and left it raw. She stood straight, unyielding, her bronze skin gleaming faintly under the sun's dying light. Her hair, black as a raven's wing, spilled wild and unbound, catching the wind like a banner of defiance. Her dress strange, woven with patterns Wes couldn't place, was torn at the shoulder, the fabric fraying where a strap had given way. And there, on her bare skin, was the mark that stopped him cold, a spiraling tattoo. Black ink curling into the shape of a bird, breaking free, wings spread as if it could tear itself from her flesh and soar. He knew that mark, 5 years ago, half dead in the desert, his blood soaking the sand. A man had pulled him from the jaws of death, a man with no name Wes could pronounce, from a tribe that didn't bother with maps or borders. That man had the same tattoo on his hand, inked with the same fierce precision. He'd given Wes water, a scrap of shade, and a reason to keep breathing when the world had all but given up on him. No questions, no demands, just a quiet act of mercy that Wes had carried like a debt ever since. The auctioneer's gavel cracked against a post, sharp as a gunshot. "Startin' at $5, he barked, his voice greasy with practice. The crowd murmured, some chuckling at the price, others spitting into the dirt. "5? Hell, she ain't worth that," a man in a stained coat sneered, his grin showing, teeth yellowed by tobacco. The woman's eyes flicked toward the sound, dark and unblinking, but her face didn't shift. She stood like a blade planted in the earth, sharp and unmoved, her breath coming quick but steady. The crowd pressed closer, a mix of hunger and disdain in their eyes, their voices weaving a net of ownership around her. Wes felt his boots shift forward before his mind caught up. "5, he said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the noise like a stone dropped in still water. The laughter faltered, heads turned, eyes narrowing at the stranger in the worn duster, his face half hidden under the hat. The auctioneer blinked, then shrugged, already counting the coins in his mind. "Sold," he called, slamming the gavel again. Wes climbed the platform, each step deliberate, his boots thudding on the uneven wood. He handed over the coins, their weight cold in his palm, and the men in dirty coats untied the woman's wrists, shoving her toward him with a roughness that made his fingers twitch, toward his gun. She stumbled slightly, then caught herself, her chin lifting as her eyes met his. They were dark as midnight, proud and fierce, but there was a flicker in them, surprise, maybe, or something deeper, like recognition. Her arms trembled faintly, the red marks from the ropes stark against her skin, but she held herself tall. He placed a hand on her shoulder, careful but firm, guiding her down the steps and through the crowd. Whispers followed them like a bad wind. "What's the cowboy want with that cursed thing?" One voice hissed. "Fool don't know what he's bought." Another muttered, "Let him take her, she'll bring him nothin' but death." Wes ignored them, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed ahead. The woman's steps were small but quick, matching his stride as they left the auction yard and turned down a side street, the crowd's gaze burning into his back. When they were far enough from the square, hidden by the shadow of a crumbling adobe wall, Wes stopped and turned to her. She stood still, her eyes locked on his, her breath steady now but her hands clenched at her sides. Fear was there, yes, but something sharper too, something that cut through the dust and the heat, something alive and unbroken. "You know why I bought you?" he asked, his voice low, meant for her alone. She hesitated, then shook her head, the motion small but deliberate. Wes tipped his hat back, letting her see his eyes grey, steady, carrying the weight of too many years on the frontier. "Because 5 years ago, your father saved me," he said, "and it's about time I paid him back." Her lips parted, and though her voice was rough from thirst and dust, it carried a strength that matched her gaze. "You remember him," she whispered. "I do," Wes said, his voice softer now, almost lost in the wind. They didn't speak again. As they moved through the back alleys, the city's eyes still watching from every corner, Wes led her to the livery where his horse, a bay mare with a scar across her flank, waited. The woman stood quietly as he untied the reins, her hands red and raw where the ropes had bitten into her wrists. "What's your name?" he asked. Glancing at her, she hesitated, then answered, soft but steady. Unoke, he repeated, testing the weight of it. "I'm Wes." She nodded once, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if measuring him. He swung into the saddle, then held a hand down to her. She looked at it for a moment, her gaze sharp, then took it and climbed up behind him, her movements quick and sure despite the tremor in her arms. They rode out of the city in silence, the clop of hooves on hard-packed dirt the only sound between them. The buildings fell away, giving way to the wide, merciless plains. And it wasn't until the dust of the town was a faint smear on the horizon that she spoke again. "You didn't have to do it," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Over the wind, I know," Wes said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "But your father saved me once. Out in the desert, I'd been shot, left for dead. He patched me up, gave me water, food, a place to sleep. Didn't ask for a thing." He felt her shift slightly behind him, her hands gripping the saddle tighter. "That was my father," she said softly. "Tower, that was him." Wes nodded, his jaw tight. Then her voice hardened, sharp as a blade. "He's dead now." He didn't press, not yet. The plains stretched out before them, flat and unyielding, the sky above a deep bruise of purple as dusk crept in. They rode another mile in silence before she spoke again, her words low and deliberate. "They came to our village at night. Men, with guns, said we had to pay or burn. My father wouldn't give them what they wanted, so they took us instead." Her breath hitched, but she didn't stop. "They took me and my sisters, 3 of us. I'm the oldest. We fought them. I broke loose and ran. They caught me again the next day, but not before I saw what they did to my father." Wes didn't ask what she'd seen. He didn't need to. The weight of her words settled between them, heavy as the dust on his boots. "They were going to sell me, too," she finished, her voice dropping low. "Like my sisters, but I don't know where. They took them." He kept his eyes ahead, the horizon a thin line of fading light. "You know who they were?" he asked finally. She nodded, her voice cold. "Outlaws, a gang. I know their leader's face. I'll never forget it." "How many?" Wes asked. 10, maybe 12. More back at their camp. He spat into the dust, the sound sharp in the quiet. "That's a lot of men for 2 people to handle." Her hands clenched at his sides, her voice fierce. "They took my sisters." "I know," he said, his tone steady but carrying an edge of promise. She leaned closer, her breath hot against his ear. "You're not afraid, are you?" He smirked despite himself. "Not yet." They rode on until the sky deepened to a star-flecked black, the air turning sharp with the night's chill. They made camp by a dry creek bed, a small fire crackling just enough to keep the cold at bay. Wes handed her a piece of jerky and a tin cup of water, and she took them without a word, her movements careful but sure. After they ate, she met his eyes across the fire, the flames casting shadows across her face. "Wes," she said, her voice steady now, "I know where they'll take them. There's a canyon west of here, Devil's Cut. That's where they keep what they steal before they sell it. Women, horses, anything." He nodded slowly, leaning back to stare up at the stars. "How far, if we ride hard?" "By tomorrow night," she said. "Then tomorrow we ride hard," he replied, his voice firm, carrying the weight of a vow. Her lips curled just slightly, like she almost believed him, and for the first time all day, she looked like she might sleep. As she settled against her blanket, she murmured one last thing, so soft he nearly missed it. "My sisters' names are Kiona and Misu." "Kiona Misu," he repeated, the names settling into him like stones in a riverbed. "We'll bring them home. The fire cracked, the night stretched cold around them, and Wes felt something new settle into his chest, heavier than any gun or saddle, heavier even than the debt he owed her father. A promise, not just to Anoke, but to all three of them, and come morning, he aimed to keep it. They broke camp before dawn, the desert air sharp and biting, the stars still clinging to the sky. Anoke moved with quiet purpose, her strange dress now cinched tight to let her ride easier, the feather in her hair trembling in the wind. They spoke little, the weight of the day ahead pressing down on them both. By the time the first streaks of gold split the horizon, they were miles from the city, the dust curling up under the mare's hooves as the land stretched flat and merciless before them. Anoke sat behind him, her hands steady at his belt, her eyes scanning the horizon. Every so often, she'd point, murmuring directions towards signs. Wes would have missed shallow hoofprints in the dry earth, a snapped branch, ashes from an old campfire. She knew this land, her quiet expertise making Wes feel almost clumsy by comparison. Though he'd ridden these plains for years, they rode fast through the morning, slowing only when the sun climbed high and the heat pressed down like a fist. By noon, they found the first real sign of the outlaws, deep ruts cut into the dirt, fresh, beside hoofprints too numerous to count. Anoke slid off the horse and knelt, her fingers tracing the grooves, her face unreadable. "They're moving fast," she said, her voice calm but sharp, but not careful. "Too many horses, they're overconfident." Wes swung down and crouched beside her, his eyes narrowing at the tracks. "You think they know you got away?" She glanced up, her gaze steady. "They know by now." She rose, brushing the dust from her hands, and nodded toward the horizon. "We keep moving. If they reach Devil's Cut before us, it'll be harder. More men, stronger ground to defend." He nodded, mounting again and helping her up. All afternoon, they followed the trail, picking up scraps of cloth snagged on brush, bits of food dropped carelessly along the way. The outlaws' arrogance was their breadcrumb trail, and Wes felt the tension in his chest tighten with every mile. At one point, a shadow passed overhead, a hawk circling high, its wings cutting sharp against the sky. Anoke looked up, murmuring something in a language Wes didn't know. "What was that?" he asked. "A prayer," she said simply, her eyes still on the bird. They pressed on. As dusk fell, they crested a ridge and saw it, Devil's Cut, a jagged scar in the earth, its sharp rock walls swallowing the last light of day. A thin wisp of smoke rose from within, curling like a warning. Anoke's eyes narrowed. "They're here." They dismounted, leading the horse to a sheltered spot behind a stand of boulders. From here, they'd go on foot. Wes grabbed his rifle, Anoke her knife, and they took only what they needed: canteens, ammunition, and the promise of what lay ahead. As they neared the canyon's edge, voices drifted up, laughter, harsh orders, the clink of bottles. Wes eased forward and peered down. The camp sprawled at the bottom. 3 wagons circled up, a half-dozen horses tied nearby, and at least 10 men milling about. In the center, 2 women sat near the fire, their wrists bound but their heads held high. Even in the fading light, Wes could see they carried Anoke's proud bearing, though their faces were pale and drawn. Anoke crouched beside him, her fingers digging into the rock. "Kiona," she whispered. Misu. Her eyes burned, but her voice stayed steady. Wes counted heads, 12 men, just as she'd said, most with pistols, a few with rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. A sentry stood farther up the path, more interested in his flask than the darkness beyond. "They're cocky," Wes murmured. Anoke's lips tightened. "They don't expect anyone to come for them." He pulled back, sitting with his back to the rock, his mind turning. 2 of us against 12, he said finally. "If we go in loud, we won't make it far." Her gaze met his, hard and unflinching. "We wait," she said. "We watch. Tonight, we cut their throats while they sleep if we have to." He almost smiled. "You really are your father's daughter." That earned him the faintest flicker of a grin before she turned back to the canyon. They settled into position as darkness swallowed the camp below. Wes checked his rifle, counting rounds, while Anoke ran her thumb along her knife's blade, murmuring under her breath, not a prayer this time, but a promise. And as the stars came out and the fire below burned low, Wes found himself making the same promise to her, to her sisters, to himself. They'd bring them out of that pit, and God help anyone who tried to stop them. The night wrapped around Devil's Cut like a shroud. the canyon walls rising sharp and unforgiving under a sky pricked with indifferent stars. The air hung thick with the scent of smoke from the outlaws' fire below, mingled with the faint metallic tang of cooling rock and the distant howl of a coyote echoing through the emptiness. Wes lay flat on the ledge, his rifle balanced across his forearms, the cold steel a steady anchor against the pulse of adrenaline thrumming in his veins. Beside him, Anoke crouched, motionless, her knife gripped in one hand, her eyes fixed on the flickering glow at the canyon's bottom. The feather in her hair stirred faintly in the breeze, a fragile contrast to the tension etched into her jaw. Hours dragged on, the silence between them broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire below or the muffled snort of a horse. Wes glanced at her, noting the way her breath came even, controlled, despite the shadows playing across her face. She hadn't flinched since they'd settled in, her gaze unwavering on her sisters tied near the flames. Kiona and Miss Onahames, that now carried weight for him too, pulling him deeper into this debt he'd chosen to repay. He shifted slightly, the grit of the rock biting into his elbows. "We need a plan," he whispered, his voice low enough to blend with the wind. Anoki's eyes flicked to him, dark and assessing, before returning to the camp. "We wait until the fire dies low. Most will sleep. The sentry first quiet, then the sisters." Wes nodded, his mind turning over the risks like stones in a dry riverbed. 12 men, maybe more, if reinforcements had trickled in. The canyon-funneled sound amplified every misstep. One wrong move, and the night would erupt in gunfire, turning their rescue into a slaughter. But her plan was sound, born from the same harsh land that had shaped her. He respected that, the quiet certainty in her voice, the way she didn't waste words on fear. It reminded him of her father, Tawa, whose mercy had been delivered with the same unflinching resolve. "You've done this before?" he asked, not doubting, just probing the edges of who she was. She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the knife's hilt. The blade caught a glint of starlight, sharp as her tone. "Not like this. But I've hunted, fought. The land teaches you, or it kills you." The simplicity of it struck him, mirroring his own life on the frontier, endless rides through dust storms that choked the air, nights where the cold seeped into your bones like a promise of death, and men who turned savage under the sun's unrelenting glare. He'd lost count of the scars earned in border skirmishes, the friends buried in shallow graves. But here, with her, it felt different. Not some fleeting spark, but a shared grit, forged in the fire of survival. He didn't know her beyond the tattoo and the debt, yet in this moment, watching her scan the shadows, he felt a tether forming respect, earned through the shared weight of what lay ahead. Below, the outlaw's laughter faded as the fire dwindled. 2 embers, casting long twisted shadows across the wagons. One by one, the men slumped into their blankets, pistols close at hand, their snores rising like a ragged chorus. The sentry at the upper path leaned against a boulder, his flask tipping lazily to his lips. Wes felt the air grow heavier, the night's chill pressing in, making his breath fog faintly. Anoki's hand brushed his arm as she shifted, intentional, but it sent a jolt through him, a reminder of her presence, warm and alive against the cold stone. "Now," she murmured, her voice steady. They moved like ghosts down a narrow goat trail, hugging the canyon wall where the shadows clung thickest. The rock underfoot was loose, gravel shifting with each step, threatening to betray them. Wes's boots scraped softly, and he froze, heart pounding, but no alarm rose from below. Anoke led, her movements fluid, silent as the wind through sagebrush. She reached the sentry first, her knife flashing in a swift arc. The man gurgled once, then slumped, blood dark against the dirt. She eased him down, wiping the blade on his coat with efficiency that spoke of necessity, not cruelty. Wes met her eyes in the dim light, no triumph there, just resolve. He nodded, and they pressed on. At the camp's edge, the air reeked of whiskey and unwashed bodies. The sisters sat bound to a post, their heads bowed but not broken. Kyo's eyes snapped open as Anoke approached, widening in silent recognition. Anoke pressed a finger to her lips, slicing the ropes with quick strokes. Mishu stirred, a tiny sob escaping before Anoke hushed her with a gentle touch. Wes covered them, rifle raised, scanning the sleeping forms. His pulse thrummed in his ears, the weight of the moment pressing down the fragility of it all. How one cough, one shift, could shatter everything. They were almost clear when a bottle clinked against stone. Wes froze, his breath catching. An outlaw rolled over, eyes fluttering open, blinking at the shadows. Hey, the word barely formed before Wes's knife sank into his chest, the man collapsing with a wet thud. But it was enough. Another stirred, then shouted, the camp erupting in chaos. Gunshots cracked, bullets sparking off rocks as the sisters scrambled up the trail, skirts snagging on jagged edges. Wes barked, shoving Misu ahead as he fired back, dropping one banded mid-charge. Anoke whirled, her knife flashing to fend off a lunging outlaw, the clash of steel ringing sharp in the night. Blood sprayed hot and sticky across her arm, but she didn't falter. Wes reloaded, the acrid smell of gunpowder burning his nostrils, his hands steady despite the roar in his chest. The climb was a nightmare, loose gravel sliding underfoot, the canyon walls echoing with curses and lead. A bullet grazed Wes' shoulder, fire blooming across his skin, but he pushed on. Covering their retreat, they crested the ridge as the outlaws spilled out below, firing wildly into the dark. Wes pulled the sisters behind boulders, dropping to one knee and levering rounds into the pursuers. Each shot echoed like thunder, buying seconds, heartbeats. When his rifle clicked empty, he slung it and sprinted for the horses, the animals stamping nervously at the noise. Anoke boosted Misu up, then Kiona, her face streaked with dirt and determination. Ride, Wes yelled, mounting and spurring the mare into a gallop. The desert swallowed them, wind whipping past, bullets whining like angry bees before fading. They didn't stop until the moon hung high, the horses foaming with sweat. Dismounting in a shallow wash, the sisters collapsed into each other's arms, sobs muffled against shoulders. Anoke stood apart, staring back at the black horizon, her knife still clutched, blood drying dark on her skin. Wes approached, his shoulder throbbing, the pain a sharp reminder of how close they'd come. You kept your word, he said, voice rough. From Dustot, she shook her head, eyes glittering. Not yet. We owe them for my father. He nodded, the weight settling deeper. But in her gaze, he saw something shift, not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. They'd bled together now, shared the knife's edge of survival. It wasn't love, it was trust, hard-won in the frontier's unforgiving forge. Dawn broke raw across the desert, painting the sky in streaks of blood red and gold. The air carried the crisp bite of morning, laced with the faint scent of creosote bushes stirring in the wind. Wes's shoulder burned, the graze bandaged roughly with a strip torn from his shirt, but the pain kept him sharp. They rode south, skirting dry washes and boulder fields, the sisters on stolen horses from the outlaws' string. Kiona and Misu rode close to Anoke, their faces pale but eyes fierce, mirroring their sister's unyielding spirit. The land stretched, merciless, heat rising in waves that shimmered the horizon, turning distant rocks into mirages. Anoke glanced at Wes, her expression unreadable. They'll follow. We hit them hard, but their leader Blackthorn, he won't let this go. Wes spat dust from his mouth, the taste gritty and bitter. Blackthorn heard the name, runs with a mean crew, burns villagers for sport. She nodded, her voice low. He killed my father slow, made us watch, for refusing tribute. The words hung heavy, stirring something in Wes, a echo of his own losses. Years back, raiders had torched his family's ranch, leaving him orphaned and wandering. He'd buried that pain deep, let it fuel his solitary rides, but hearing her now, cracked it open. Lost kin to men like him, he admitted, eyes on the horizon, makes a man hard, or breaks him. She met his gaze, the feather in her hair dancing. You didn't break, neither did you. The exchange was brief, but it bridged the gap between them. Respect, rooted in shared scars, not fleeting emotion. The frontier demanded it. Survival here wasn't solitary. It required allies, once tested in blood and dust. By mid-morning, dust rose in the distance, a plume signaling riders. They're coming, Anoke said, her tone flat but urgent. Wes scanned the terrain, spotting Devil's Hollow ahead, a narrow cut funneling into a choke point. We make a stand there, trap them, she agreed, her eyes sharpening. They hid the sisters in a shallow cave above the trail. Kiona clutching a pistol Wes handed her, Misu's hands trembling but resolute. Wes positioned on a ledge, rifle ready, while Anoke set traps, bellowstones piled to tumble, tripwires from scavenged rope. The heat pressed down, sweat stinging his wound, the air thick with anticipation. Hoofbeats grew louder. Voices carrying curses, promises of vengeance. 10 riders appeared, guns drawn, eyes fixed ahead. They didn't see the ambush. Wes fired, the lead man pitching from his horse. Chaos erupting. Horses reared. Men scrambled. Anoke leaped from hiding, knife sinking into one, then another. Bullets winged, rock chips flying as Wes picked off climbers. His shots precise despite the burn in his shoulder. One outlaw scrambled close, aiming at Wes, but Anoke dragged him back, blade flashing. 2 fled. Wes dropped one, the last vanishing. Into rocks. Silence fell, dust and gunpowder hanging thick. Anoke stood amid the dead, bloodied but unbroken, her breath ragged. "It's done," Wes said, climbing down. "Not yet," she replied, eyes on the crawler, the leader, Blackthorn, clutching a leg. She approached, shadow falling. "You killed my father." His plea died as her knife ended it. Now, it was done. They gathered supplies, scattered horses, and rejoined the sisters. Mounting up, they rode north, the sun high, Wes's arms aching but spirit lighter. Glancing at Anoke, riding ahead, chin high, he felt the bond solidify forged in the frontier's crucible, resilient against what lay ahead. The ride north dragged under the relentless sun, heat baking the earth until cracks spider-webbed the dirt. Like veins, thirst clawed at their throats, the canteens running low, the air shimmering with mirages that teased oases never reached. Kiona and Misu rode silently, their faces drawn, the trauma of captivity etched in hollow eyes and tight grips. On reins, Anoke stayed vigilant, scanning horizons, her knife never far. Wes felt the pull of exhaustion, his shoulder a constant throb, but the shared glances with Anoke kept him steady as silent understanding, built on the night's violence and the day's endurance. As evening fell, they camped in a cluster of boulders, the rocks still radiating heat like embers. The sisters huddled close, whispering in their tongue, while Wes built a small fire. Anoke sat apart, cleaning her knife, the rhythmic scrape filling the quiet. Wes approached, offering jerky. "You fight like you've got nothing to lose," he said. She took it, eyes meeting his. "I lost everything once, won't again." He sat, the fire's warmth easing the chill settling in. "After my folks died, I rode alone. Thought it safer, but this," gestured to the sisters, "reminds me some burdens are worth sharing." She nodded, a faint smile ghosting her lips. "My father taught me strength in silence, but tonight, your gun spoke for us." The words deepened their link, mutual respect, tempered by hardship. But doubt crept in for Wes. Was this debt paid, or had he entangled himself in an endless cycle? For Anoke, vengeance sated, but grief lingered, a inner storm threatening to isolate her again. Night deepened, stars wheeling overhead, a distant rumble. "Thunder, no, hooves more," Wes whispered, rifle in hand. Anoke's face hardened, Blackthorn's remnants, or allies. The frontier's cruelty amplified it. No rest, only pursuit. They broke camp, riding into the dark, the bond between them a fragile shield against the encroaching threat. Moonlight silvered the plains, turning the landscape ghostly. The pursuers' lights bobbed in the distance, torches flickering like malevolent eyes. Wes urged the horses faster, but fatigue weighed them down, hooves stumbling on uneven ground. Anoke rode beside him now, her presence a steady force. "We head for the river," she said. "Cross it, lose them in the canyons beyond." He agreed, but inner conflict gnawed. This wasn't his fight initially, yet now it consumed him. For her, the drive to protect her sister's ward with the pull to confront, to end it fully. They reached the river at dawn, water rushing cold and swift, foam white against rocks. Crossing was perilous, currents tugging, horses slipping. Misu cried out as her mount faltered, but Anoke grabbed her, pulling her across. On the far bank, wet and shivering, they looked back. Riders crested the opposite ridge, spotting them. "Keep moving," Wes urged, but his voice carried weariness. The chase wore on, the land turning rugged, canyons twisting like serpents. Heat returned, blistering skin, thirst a constant ache. In a narrow pass, they ambushed again. West, firing from above, Anoke below. Dropping 3 before the rest, retreated. Camp that night was tense, the sisters asleep, Wes and Anoke watching. "Why stay?" she asked softly. "Debt to your father," he replied, "and now, to you." She touched his arm, the contact brief, but electric. "It's more than debt." He nodded, the admission silent. Respect had bloomed into alliance, fragile but real, tested in the border's harsh embrace. Days blurred into a grueling trek, the pursuers dogged but thinning. Inner doubts surfaced west, questioning if he'd survive. Unoke wrestling with survivor's guilt, yet shared moments dividing sparse water, binding wounds strengthened them. The frontier's brutality honed their connection, making it resilient. Finally, the village appeared, smoke curling from huts. As they approached, villagers emerged, recognition dawning. The elder welcomed them, eyes on Wes. "The debt is paid," Unoke translated, her voice steady. Amid embraces, she turned to Wes. "You'll go." He studied her, the proud stance, weary eyes. "You'll be all right. I've got them," she said, glancing at her sisters. He tipped his hat, turning, but her voice stopped him. "Wes, thank you." He smiled faintly. "No need. Not for this." Riding away, he looked back, the three silhouettes against the sky. The bond lingered, a promise of what the frontier could forge, not love, but something enduring, born of respect and shared trials. But as dust settled, a shot rang out pursuers. One last stand. Wes wheeled, racing back, the conflict reigniting, threatening. All they'd built,